Bless God. All right, so I look like a Teletubby this morning because I said that I would wear pajamas if Jeff came to church. Jeff is in here someplace. How you doing, Jeff? And Lenny said, I will do about anything to get you to come to church, just so you know it. And so I look ridiculous in my Teletubby costume. I did have to bring you all to laugh and to cry and to come closer to Jesus looking like a Teletubby. So I'm not going to do that to you this morning. But what I do want to tell you about is we have got some... there it is. That's the play in the back. See, today we're talking about emotion, right? And so now we're going to do our announcements with emotion. There was a Buddhist monk. He was a part of the order of the 2 words per decade order. And he was 20 years old, and he came into the order, and he was 30 years old, and so he got to say his 2 words. It was Francis Chamberlain was his name, and the boss of the place was Father Talbot. So he goes into Father Talbot's office, and Father Talbot is there. He's got his pen and paper because this is a big deal. They only get to say 2 words every 10 years. And so Father Tablet is there with his tablet. That's why they called him Father Tablet. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know why he had a tablet. But yeah, he had his tablet there, and he was ready to write down the words that Francis Chamberlain was going to say. And Francis Chamberlain came up. He looks at him, and he says, "Food, bad." He looks at him. He turns around and he walks out. So Father Talbot writes down, "Food, bad." So then another 10 years go on. And Francis Chamberlain, now he's 40 years old because he's been there that long. And he comes in 40 years old, and Father Talbot is getting old now, but he's got his tablet open because he's Father Tablet. And he gets ready to write, and he waits, and he's like, hopefully this will be more profound than last time. And Francis Chamberlain looks over the table to him, and he says, "Bed hard." Passionately turns around and walks out. Father Tablet writes down, "Bed hard." So he's 50 years old, and he walks in, and now Father Tablet is dead, and so now it's Father Notebook. No, I don't know what the next guy's name was. He had a computer. And Francis Chamberlain walks in, and Father Notebook, that wasn't his name, I don't remember his name, and is sitting there, and he says, "I quit." And the father stands up, slams this thing down, and he says, "I looked at your notes. It's no wonder you're quitting. All you've done since you've gotten here is complain." And he walks out and he quit. That's not real. That's a joke. But today we're talking about controlling our emotions. Okay? How do you control your emotions? It's important that you figure out why. Now, this is a book. This is the title of the book. What the Nun Study Teaches Us About Leading Longer, Healthier, More Meaningful Lives by David Snowdown, Ph.D. And what he did is he did a study. He found a convent, a nunnery, where the 678 nuns were in this nunnery. And what they would do when they would sign up at 20 years old or 18 to 20 years old is the nuns would write an essay. And in this little essay, they would talk about different things. And what he did is he took those 678 essays and he studied them. And he analyzed them for positive and negative emotions. And he broke the nuns down on ones that had a strong emotional life and a bad emotional life. They just tend to look at the glass as half full. And at the end of the study, now he wasn't there when they started doing it because all the nuns in the study were between 74 years old and 106 years old. Okay, so he was able to analyze this because that's what they always did for the nuns coming in. And some of the things that he discovered was interesting. One was the nuns that in their original essay consistently were more productive in their ministries than the ones that were negative. The positive emotion nuns were more productive. But probably more interesting and more tangible is the nuns that had more positive emotional states were twice as likely not to die as their counterparts at any age. Okay? So at any age, whether it be 20 or 60, the ones who had positive emotions in their original essay were twice as likely not to die for any reason than the others. Now, this is really interesting. The negative emotion nuns were twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease than the positive emotion nuns. And so how you feel about the world you live in makes a tangible, scientifically proven difference in how productive you are. It makes a proven, scientifically proven difference in how long you're going to live. Remember, the positive emotional ones are twice as likely to live as the others. And you're twice as likely not to develop Alzheimer's if you have a good emotional state in your life. And so it's worth taking the time to say, how can I control my emotions? How can I get my arms around my emotions? Louis, could you close that door for me? Maybe they can't hear it, but I can hear it. And I lose my train of thought, and all kinds of bad things happen when that happens. There was a study done in, Gerald Stossel, the 2020 guy. This used to be about 2020. He did a series of things that were getting rid of myths. And he did a number of myths that you think are true that really aren't true. One of the myths that he did in that study, in his report, was the idea that letting loose and letting it rip with your anger makes you feel better long term. And he said, I just had to get that out, and now I feel so much better. That is scientifically untrue. They have proven that over and over again. Getting mad does not get you less mad. Getting mad inevitably gets you more mad. Thank you, Louis. I'm glad somebody's with me today. Getting mad gets you more mad. And so how can we control our emotions? Bad emotions don't just make you unhappy, they literally kill you and destroy your mind. So this is worthwhile stuff to take a look at. Is that me buzzing? Is that something? So there are emotions. See, every time some little thing happens, I get distracted. What was I going to say next, James? I was going to talk about the basket case that I am. That's what I was going to say next. Everybody thinks you're normal when they just look at you, right? And I've come to the decision, I choose to believe this whether it's true or not, that other people are actually just as neurotic as I am. They just don't, so that's why I think this. And because I only live in my own head. I don't live in your head. And so I know that I act normal when I'm actually going a little nutty on the inside. And when it comes to emotions, some people I've worked with and some people I've known, they kind of feel pretty much the same every day. Their emotions don't fluctuate a lot. Now, everybody's does some, and everybody is well served to learn to manage and their emotions. But some of us go like this with our emotions. And sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to going like this. I was getting my ordination, and so we're in this test, and they're talking to Ingerlisa. It wasn't really a test, but they're interviewing us. And somehow Ingerlisa, in that conversation, they asked about our relationship. And Ingerlisa responds to them, well, Scott's the woman in the relationship. With all of these professional guys deciding whether or not they're going to ordain me. And we've actually often joked about that, because I am way more, women are supposed to be moody, right? You guys have a reputation for being moody. That's not the way it is in our house, okay? In our house, I'm moody, okay? I'm the woman in the relationship, at least in that regard. Because I'm a little bit manic, and if you've heard me very long, you maybe have heard me talk about that before. I have bad days and good days. And it's a chemical thing, because sometimes I don't even have a reason to have a bad day, I just have a bad day, And I actually like that about myself, because I've learned that, and Lord and I have talked about this, and it's, God, I'll take the bad days, because I think that not only do I sometimes feel bad, but sometimes I get to feel really, really good. And if you ever work with somebody who is dangerously manic, they're just crazy high, and then they crash really low. And the idea is to try to even those out. But I'm a pretty passionate guy, and I've learned that by managing my emotions and doubling down on my passionate times and managing my down times, I can do pretty well and function, relatively normally in this life. And so, some things I want to tell you about emotions. When I was 22 years old. I was 21 years old. I was doing an internship, and I worked harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I told you last week, we talked about, how many hours Americans work and stuff. I was working with Pastor Bruce Larson at First Assembly, and for a period of time, we were doing the Scrooge play. And for a month, and I promise you, I'm not lying, we worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because, you're carrying the normal work of the church and building the sets and all this stuff. And kept that schedule for a month. And before that, it was 7 days a week, but not necessarily the 90-hour thing that tends to happen. And I learned, but you're working hard because you kind of enjoy what you're doing. You're passionate, you're excited, you're throwing yourself into your work. And I remember it was the night before opening night. Bruce, it was 11 o'clock at night. We had just worked all day long. And Bruce looked at me and he said, Scott, you need to get ready because you're going to crash after this. And then he said something that the little phrase that I'm going to share with you has helped me so many times in my life, I can't even begin to tell you. And that phrase is this: don't take yourself too seriously. Let yourself feel bad. And that was an incredible revelation for me. See, if you're like me, the tendency when you feel bad is to feel bad about feeling bad. Okay? And shame, that's what that is. When you feel bad about feeling bad, shame, studies show, and there's a book I just read a while ago about shame, it was all about shame, is the most toxic emotion there is. Nothing will suck the life out of you and destroy you faster than shame. And so if you're a passionate person, and Bruce is a musician, and I'm not a musician, but I'm a passionate person, and you swing, and you feel bad, when you start feeling bad about feeling bad, now you are in kind of a dangerous spot. And so we work so hard, and I've used that phrase over and over in my life, that don't take yourself so serious. And there's a few things I want to tell you about emotions today that I've learned. And I'm not an expert, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist, but I am somebody who knows what it is to swing. And so if you're here today and you swing, I can relate with that. If you're just the same all the time, or don't swing as much, you'll get things out of today's message as well. But it could be life-changing for those of you that rock it up and down. And that, number one, emotions are amoral. I don't think you should ever feel guilty about how you feel. I don't think you should ever feel guilty about how you feel. Now, we do all the time. I shouldn't feel this way. Why do I feel this way? And you internalize it, and you allow shame to come in. Emotions are amoral. Now, why are they amoral? And we're going to talk about more of this in a minute. But you can't control your emotions. I believe that. When they come, they just are. Okay? But we can control what we think about. Emotions are a thermometer. They give you a reading of what's happening inside of you. The thermometer doesn't control the temperature in the room. It's not the thermometer's fault that it's cold. Okay? It's not the thermometer's fault that it's hot. The thermometer just tells you what's happening. And so one of the most self-actualizing things that you can do, one of the most powerful things that you can do as a person that will make you more effective at your job, at your family, make you more effective in handling and managing your emotions, is when you have an emotion, rather than reacting to it, take a step back and ask why. Why? Why am I feeling this way? Now, since I started studying this and thinking along these lines, this is really powerful. Something happens to you and you get angry. You get, whoo. I don't know if you have that feeling in you, but something happens and you go, whoo. And you're upset about it. It's hit you in some way. And hopefully, as you have matured and grown up, you learned not to react to that thing right away. And when we are emotionally immature, what we do is we have that emotion and we lash out right away. This is the dumb thing that we say to our wives that they don't talk to us for 2 days, okay? And we don't even, this is the kind of stuff. We feel something, we say, it removes the filter and it comes right out. So that's the thermometer. If you can take a step back and ask why, you can really dig in. We could preach a whole sermon on that. I'm not going to do that today, but that's The DNA of Relationships is a wonderful book that has a chapter on that that you can take a look at. But if you take a step back and ask why, it's a thermometer of what's already happening inside of you. And our emotions come a lot of times from our insecurities. And if we're getting mad about something, we need to ask ourselves, why am I getting mad at that? Well, because they did that. Well, why does that upset you? We can't control what happens to us. What we can control is what happens in us. You cannot control your emotions by gritting your teeth. I'll tell you right now. You know, you can't decide to be happy when you're sad. And for you young guys, I'm going to give you a tip. If you are newly married or someday might be married, it doesn't work to just tell your wife, snap out of it and get happy. It doesn't work at all, okay? Because it just doesn't happen. And that, you know, that's what leads to, you know, unfortunate things. We can't control our emotions by gritting our teeth. But, so how do I control my emotions? Once your emotions are there, they just are. They're amoral. Don't allow yourself to feel shame for how you feel. But we are accountable, and we do need to look at what we do. What can I do? Your emotions are dictated by what you think about. By what you think about. Okay? What you think about is the thermostat. Because whatever you think about, that's where your head is going to go. You're driving down the road. I have a pet peeve, okay? My pet peeve is roundabouts. You know, I think when people got their driver's license, they didn't cover roundabouts because they're fairly new. And if I pull up to a thing and someone comes to a complete stop at a roundabout and nobody else in it, I go ape, okay? I say moron with more venom on it than you can ever imagine, you know? And I did it the other day with Elizabeth in the back. I thought, that was dumb, you know? Go! You know, you're yelling at somebody. And why is that? It's because when somebody does that, I think to myself, you're a moron, okay? And instead of telling another story. So you're driving down the road, and somebody is coming up alongside of you, and they're right here, and they swing into you, and you have to slam on your brakes and pull over to the shoulder to avoid them. And as they go past you, you see this person on their cell phone talking with his other hand. Okay? And he's almost just run you off the road. Now you go into road rage, yes? You're irritated with this person because this person is a moron. Okay, let's just face it. And we tell ourselves the story and we say to ourselves, self, this person is an inconsiderate jerk that almost killed me, and he's just talking to his buddy on the phone about some past hunting trip that he went on. But what if, when he did that, that's not what actually happened? What actually had happened was he was driving down the road, and he got a call on his phone, and he answered his phone because it was his wife, and it was a weird time of day for his wife to be calling. And what he finds out is that his daughter had just gotten in a car accident. She was in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. And they weren't sure what her condition was. And his wife is crying on the phone. And that's why he was on the phone and reared and almost ran you off the road. Changes your perspective a little bit, right? Because if you're in that situation, I mean, someone gets a pass if that's the case. Now, I know what you're thinking. What are the chances, Pastor Scott, that his wife just got into a car accident? And let me ask you a couple of questions. Do you know 100% which one is true? No. You have no idea what happened in that car to make him veer into you. And so, you have a choice to make. You can choose to feel negative emotions by believing something that is probably right, but maybe not right. Now, in negative emotions make you dumb, make you die sooner, make you get Alzheimer's, okay? Or you can be in the car and you can tell yourself a story that could be true, maybe isn't, but is more healthy for you to believe. Did you follow me? Did I go through that again? Because that was pretty cool, just so you know it. And so, the story you tell yourself, you don't know the truth either way, right? And so the story you tell yourself is either going to build up your emotional health or deteriorate your emotional health. Now, my wife's not here, so I'm just going to go after you ladies here for a minute. Women don't get this, okay? I'm purposely stereotyping it. I'm sure I do it too. I'm sure guys do it too, but you women. Something can happen to you, and some other lady will say something, and you will paint the worst possible scenario for why she did and said that, or why she didn't call, or why this person sat at the other table, or I said, guys probably do it too, but man, I know you women do it. And And so rather than telling yourself a story that is, you tell yourself the worst possible story, and now you feel bad about it. Now, the book that I shared with you last week, The Power of Full Engagement, the same author, the guy that we had on the screen last week, and we may have again next week, the same person who wrote that book wrote a book called The Power of Stories. I haven't actually read it yet, but I know that what he talks about is this concept of the stories we tell ourselves. The stories we tell ourselves about other people, the stories we tell ourselves about what's happened to us in our lives, and you don't know the truth either way. So why not, in your own head, sitting in the car, choose to tell yourself a positive story so that you're healthier? It costs you nothing, and your day will be better. So how then can I change how I feel? Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. And it says, "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing." I just love it. When you read something in a secular business book, and then you look to the Bible and figure out it was already there. That's what we're about to experience here.
That was our cue.
Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. "And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about these things that are excellent and worthy of praise." Now, as you came in today, you were handed a packet. Take that packet out and look at it with you for a moment and get your pen ready, okay? Get your pen ready. Because I'm going to ask you to write something down on the comment section there. You'll also find in that little packet, if this is your first time visiting here today, if you will trust me with your contact information on that large card, I would like to send you a thank you note and a gift. Even more so, I should give you the pajamas. That's what I should give you. But give me that contact information, and then I will send that to you. And we're receiving the offering in about 2 minutes' time. But get that comment portion in front of you with the pen in your hand for a minute here. And we're going to talk through a number of these. And I want you to write down the one that you need to be working on. Whatever is true. Remember I said that you don't know what's true. Almost all the time when somebody does something to you in a circumstance, think on what is true. Sometimes we think on things that if we took a step back, we would say, that's not true. Well, my wife doesn't love me. You know that's not true. Why even tell yourself that? I'm being, take a step back and focus on what is true. And if you don't know for sure what is true, why focus on something that you don't know is true if it's going to be negative? It's not worth it. So think on these things, thoughts that are true, because you can't control your emotions, but you do have control over your own head. Whatever is honorable. Is this something that's worthy of honor? This thought that I'm thinking about this person, is this an honorable thing? Is this something that I would like my friends and my parents and my family to know was going through my head? Whatever is honorable. Whatever is right. Sometimes you can think about things that are true, but they're not right. You follow that? Just because something is true doesn't mean you have to think about it a certain way. Think about things that are not only true, but they're right. This is the right thing to do. This is right. Things that are pure. Things that are lovely and admirable. Think about things that are excellent and worthy of praise. It's going to be a couple of minutes before we receive the offering, just so you know. Last week I shared with you about Elijah. And Elijah he had the biggest day of his career. And if you read the story in 1 Kings chapter 18, and if you've never read that before, write down in your comments, I will read 1 Kings chapter 18, because this is an incredible story. Elijah has an incredible day. The prophets of Baal, people are worshiping Baal in Israel. Bad things are happening. God raises up Elijah. Elijah challenges the prophets of Baal. they bring out a sacrifice, and they put this sacrifice out, and Elijah says, tell you what, whoever God answers with fire is the real God. So you go ahead and you pray to your God that he would make this fire happen, and then afterward I'll pray to mine. And whoever's God answers by fire will do it. Well, he was so boisterous. He had so much charisma. I mean, Elijah was a manic person. Okay? You read the scripture, he was up and he was down. And today he was up. He was hitting it. He was standing up. He was taunting them. And they come on. It's chapter 18. And the prophets of Baal begin to chant and pray. 1 hour, 2 hours. Then they get frustrated. And they began, as they're dancing, they begin to cut themselves. So they're chanting and they're praying to Baal most of the day. It's in the afternoon. And Elijah's been watching this for a while. And Elijah was a bit of a son of a gun. And if you read this in the Living Translation, it says that he came out and he says, hey, you guys, I think your God went on a trip. He just can't hear you. A little louder, a little longer, and maybe he'll hear you then. Okay? Then a little while later, he comes out and he says, hey, maybe Baal's in the toilet. I think he's in the bathroom. Your Bible says that. You read it. It is so funny. I think he's in the bathroom. You should go and see. And they chant, and they dance, and they cut themselves all day long. And finally they collapse. They're done. They can't go any longer. And so then Elijah steps out. His chest is punched out. He's feeling good. And he says to him, all right, I want you to come here, and I want you to dig a pit around the sacrifice. So they dig a pit around the sacrifice. And they don't know why they're even doing it. Then he says, I want you to take, and everybody get buckets of water and douse the sacrifice in water. Okay, so they go out, and they begin, and they put so much water on the sacrifice that the trench that Elijah had told them to dig around fills with water. They absolutely saturate the wood and the sacrifice with water. And then Elijah gets down on his knees. He says, Lord, do what you said you'd do. And the Bible says that a pillar of fire comes down from heaven and lights that thing up. The Bible says that it was so hot and so intense that not only did it instantly consume the entire sacrifice, but in a moment, all of the water in the trench around boiled and evaporated. God answered with fire. Now, Elijah is feeling good now. I mean, let's face it, this is awesome, right? So Elijah says, grab him. And so the people in the crowd grab the priests of Baal. Did you know the Bible would be rated R in lots of places if you played it on the screen? Elijah takes a sword and he personally kills all of them. Not the people, but the priests of Baal. Elijah kills all of them. He has a victorious day. He's absolutely flying. Then he goes home for the night, and the next day he gets a report. And he hears, Jezebel heard what you did, and she said she's going to kill you. Now, just like I had worked so hard and I was going to crash emotionally, this is what's happening to Elijah, because Elijah's a little bit manic. A lot manic. And Elijah freaks out. And he hears that, now you would think, right, Elijah, the God that can send fire from heaven and boil water away, he's certainly able to protect you, right? You know? But no matter how strong you are, what kind of man of God you are, sometimes you're just on the bottom of the shoe, man. And so even though the day before, Elijah is just pounding his chest and he's a maniac for God, right? The next day he hears that the queen wants to kill him and he gets afraid and he runs away. And that's where we find him in chapter 19, verse 4. And he's praying, and we read this verse last week. I've had enough, Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died. He has just witnessed the most incredible victory that the Old Testament contains. I mean, God just shows up in a dynamic way. And then the next day he finds out Jezebel wants to kill him, and he thinks to himself, it didn't even matter. we worked so hard. We preached, we pushed, and now it didn't even matter. They're still coming to get me. They're still in control. I'm all by myself. You'd find out later he wasn't alone. There were other prophets. But at the time, he thought he was the only one left. I'm all alone. Nobody even cares what happened yesterday. She's out to kill me. God, why don't you just do it? Why don't you just kill me? I've come as far as I can. I did the best I could, God. I laid it all out there, and it still failed. Kill me. I want to tell you something. If you've ever been there, you're in good company. 2006, I lost my job. The next 2 years would be the worst 2 years of my life. For a period of time, during that time, I was never in danger of committing suicide because the thought of what it would do to my wife, and so I was never in danger of killing myself. But for months, it was my first thought every day. And now, as I stand in front of you today now, I know that God was putting me through that circumstance to fashion me into the tool that He needed me to be. And so as I stand before you today, if I could change anything, I would go through it again. Because I know that God was building inside of me things He needed in me to make me the man that He needs me to be today. But I'll tell you what, when you're waking up every morning, that's the first thing that you think of. Not for just a day or two, but it was a few months. You're on the bottom. And you need God to step in. If you've had a time in your life when you feel like the bubble gum on somebody's shoe, not only do you feel bad, but you feel bad about feeling bad. You think nobody who isn't a complete weakling would ever feel this way or think these thoughts. I want to tell you today that if you have felt that way and if you feel that way this morning, you are in good company. Not me, but Elijah, David, Jeremiah. Write things that say that the thoughts of their lives ending were dancing around in their heads. That is the lowest of the low. And I want to encourage you today, when I felt that way, God hadn't left me. He was right there with me, and He was leading me through that experience. I know He was, because I hadn't screwed up. I hadn't made any terrible decisions. Every decision I made, I said, God, is this what you want me to do? And I would do it, and it would fail. Sometimes God will lead you into failure. I believe this with all of my heart, because He's fashioning you into the person that He needs you to be, to do what He needs you to do. Matthew was talking about that at our small groups, about that process of hardening that God does. When we close today, to my left, under the exit sign over here, there's going to be a couple of people, and they would like to pray with you. And they'll pray with you for any reason that you want. If you have pain in your body today, they will agree with you in prayer that God would heal you. If you are going through something, if you got family that you desperately want God to reach in and do something in their lives, they will pray for you today. If you're here today and you're in need of a job, you're in need of you need a miracle in your finances, they want to pray with you today. If you're here today and you feel like bubble gum on the bottom of somebody's shoe, they want to pray with you today. And on that piece of paper where it says prayer and comments, I want you to answer this question. As a result of today's talk, I will, and then you fill in the blank. Read 1 Kings chapter 16. Was it chapter 16? 14. 18. 1 Kings chapter 18. I will take a step back from my emotions and ask myself, why am I thinking this way? Or maybe it's, I will cling to God and we're going to get through this. You know, when I was going through my difficult time, in my circumstance, it was, I know that that it was God doing things in me that couldn't have happened any other way. And you know, if you're going to serve God and you're going to mature, He does that. He creates you into the person that He needs you to be to do what He needs you to do. And when those days are bad, and even when I flip around emotionally myself now, which, nothing like then, but it's to say I'm going to go to bed, and this is what God did with Elijah. Remember we talked about last week? Go to bed, and the sun's going to be brighter tomorrow. Sometimes these things just need a little time. Sometimes God needs an opportunity to come in and step in. In order for you to accomplish everything God wants to do in your life, in your family, you have to be healthy emotionally. He created you to be emotionally healthy. And what that means is we need to take responsibility for our emotions. We can't control what happens to us. We can't control how we feel. But only you get to control what happens in your head. Scott, how do you do that? I mean, this happened to me, and it comes in my head over and over and over again. I relive that conversation, Scott. I relive it, and you've all been there. You go to bed at night, and those words that were said, they play in your head over and over again. Maybe you were going through a divorce, and you go to bed, and all you think about is the circumstance that you're going in. You can't get past it. Scott, I can't. How do you control your thoughts? Well, easier said than done. I'll give you that. But I'll tell you how you control your thoughts. Gratitude is the antidote to all of that ugliness. And what I've learned to do myself when I am down is I have to get by myself. I have to get away from stuff. Because a lot of times part of what we're feeling is we're just too busy. And try thanking God for an hour and see what your mood is like at the end of it. Think on these things. Whatever is good, whatever is pure, whatever is right, whatever is honorable. You want to know who's good, right, and honorable in your life that will never leave you or forsake you? It's your Jesus. God, thank you for my family and the things that you've been doing here. Lord, thank you for this. God, thank you that I get to live in America. Lord, thank you for my car. Lord, thank you for the people, and name the people that love you and care about you. You know they do. God, thank you for this person, for that person. And then pray for them. And do that for an hour. And I'll tell you what, you got to be pretty doggone depressed to not come out of it on the other side of that. So how do you control your thoughts? You bring them to God. And gratitude is the great equalizer. God, I love you. Jesus, you saved me. For somebody, I'm going to get to be with you forever in heaven. Thank you for that, God. I'm looking forward to that, Jesus. I'm going to see you face to face. Right now, I feel you a little bit, but on that day, I'm going to know you completely. That's your God. How do you control your thoughts? You bring them to Him, and you begin speaking what's good, what's true, what's right, what's honorable. And allow Him to pull you up out of it.